Hello, we're still working on Faces at the Bottom of the Well by Derek Bell. Really good book, and we're reading a story about what would happen if space traders came and they had equipment that the United States needed to save itself, because the United States in this story is where the United States is actually now. And all they want, the aliens want black bodies. And this is where we're dealing with the politics of it. Basically, how these white politicians are going to get the country to go along with just sending all the black bodies back, which really is not going to be that difficult. So let's continue. Um, January 3 January, excuse me. The Anti-Trade Coalition, a gathering of black and liberal white politicians, civil rights representatives, and progressive academics, quickly assembled early that morning, working nonstop and driven by anxiety to cooperate more than they ever had in the past. The members of the coalition had drafted a series of legal and political steps designed to organize opposition to the space traders' offer. Constitutional challenges to any acceptance scheme were high on the list of opposition strategies. Bills opposing the trade were drafted for early introduction in Congress. There were plans for direct action, protests, and boycotts. Finally, in the that worse came to worse, and the administration decided to carry out what gathering participants were calling the African American kidnapping plot, a secret committee was selected to draft and distribute plans for massive disobedience. Now, at close to midnight, the plenary session was ready to give final approval to this broad program of resistance. At that moment, Professor Gleason Golightly sought the floor to propose an alternative response to the trade offer. Golightly's close connection to the conservative administration and the active support of its anti-black views made him far from a hero to most blacks. Many viewed his appearance at this critical hour as an administration-sponsored effort to undermine the coalition's defensive plans and tactics. At last, though, he prevailed on the conference leaders to grant him 5 minutes. As he moved toward the podium, there was a wave of hostile murmuring whose justification Golightly acknowledged. I'm well aware that political and ideological differences have for several years sustained a wide chasm between us. But the events of 2 days ago have transformed our disputes into a painful reminder of our shared status. I'm here because whatever our ideological differences or our socio-economic positions, we all know that black rights, black interests, black property, even black lives are expendable whenever their sacrifice will further or sustain white needs or preferences. Hearing Golightly admit to truths he had long denied served to silence the murmur. It has become an unwritten tradition in this country for whites to sacrifice our rights to further their own interests. This tradition overshadows the national debate about the space traders' offer and may well foretell our reply to it. Oblivious of the whites in the audience, Golightly said, I realize that our liberal white friends continue to reassure us. This is America, they tell us. It can't happen here. But I've noticed that those whites who are most vigorous in their assurances are least able to rebut the contrary teaching of both historic fact and present reality. Outside civil rights gatherings like this, the masses of black people, those you claim to represent, but to whom you seldom listen, are mostly resigned to the nation's acceptance of the space traders' offer. For them, liberal optimism is smothered by their life experience. Black people know for a fact what you, their leaders, fear to face. Black people know your plans for legislation, litigation, and protest cannot prevail against the tradition of sacrificing black rights. Indeed, your efforts will simply add a veneer of face-saving uncertainty to a debate whose outcome is not only predictable but inevitable, flying in the face of our history. You are still relying on the assumption that whites really want to grant justice to blacks, really want to alleviate onerous racial conditions. And he's dealing with the so-called white liberal. Quick story: there's a hotel in Upper Manhattan, the most liberal zip code, or one of the most liberal zip codes in the state or the country, I believe they said. And there was a homeless shelter there. The city took over a hotel and put some homeless men in it, homeless people in it. And the white liberals forced them to take those people out, and said that the crime went up. They saw drug addiction and drug abuse. Now, there's no way you're going to tell me white liberals are not doing drugs. But when homeless people came, mostly people of color, and yes, maybe they would sell drugs right out on the street, it became a problem. And you're telling me the drugs went up, drug dealing and crime, but there's an opium crisis across the country. Isn't that crime? So what does it matter if the crime looks nice or is behind closed doors or out on the street? We all know it's happening. So that's just one story about the white liberal. Until next time, I appreciate your help, and please take care of your mind, take care of your body, and be safe.